5,000 years ago, 8 souls stepped off the ark onto a dead world. You know Noah, the builder. You know Shem, the preserver. You know Japheth, the expander. But you do not know the son whose single glance altered the future of continents. His name was Ham. He saw what should have remained unseen. He spoke what should have remained unspoken. And in that moment, the destiny of Africa, of Canaan, of empires yet unborn, was sealed. This is not a story of a curse you think you understand. This is the untold account of the youngest son, the one who survived the flood only to drown in human weakness, the father of Cush and Mizraim, of Phut and Canaan, the ancestor of Egyptian pharaohs and Babylonian kings. Of warriors and builders and nations that would shape the ancient world. Stay until the end because the revelation about what Ham actually saw in his father's tent will challenge every assumption you have ever made about shame, about family, and about the cost of looking where love should have looked away. Ham was the youngest son of Noah. In the ancient world, this position carried weight. The youngest was often the favorite, the one who stayed close to the father's tent, who heard the unguarded stories, who saw the human behind the prophet. Ham grew up in the shadow of the ark, in the stench of animals, in the memory of a drowned world he barely remembered. His brothers were older, established, serious. Japheth planned. Shem listened. Ham watched. He possessed a curiosity that bordered on intrusion. He asked the questions others were afraid to ask. He looked where others turned away. When the floodwaters receded and the family stepped onto Ararat, Ham was the first to explore. He ran down the mountain slopes while his father prayed. He touched the dead wood of drowned forests while his brothers built altars. He found the remains of the old world and brought them back as trophies. A stone idol, water-worn smooth. A fragment of a wall painting, colors still visible. The jawbone of some creature that no longer existed. Noah allowed it. The youngest son needed to understand what had been lost. But there was something in Ham's gaze that unsettled. He did not look with grief. He looked with calculation. He saw the nakedness of things, the bones beneath the skin, the reality without the reverence. This was his gift. This was his danger. The vineyard was Noah's first planting. The grapes grew with supernatural speed in the renewed earth, as if creation itself wanted to forget the destruction. Noah pressed them. He fermented them. He drank the wine in his tent, alone, the first intoxication in the new world. The Bible says he became drunk. It does not say why. Perhaps the weight of survival. Perhaps the memory of screams. Perhaps the simple human need to forget what cannot be forgotten. Ham entered the tent. He did not announce himself. He did not cough or call out. He simply walked in, and he saw his father, naked, uncovered, the builder of the ark reduced to a sleeping figure of shame. Ham could have retreated. He could have covered. He could have stood guard at the tent flap and ensured no other eye would fall upon the patriarch's vulnerability. Instead, he went out. He found his brothers in the field, where they were tending the flocks. He told them. The words he used are not recorded, but the telling is. He saw the nakedness and he told. Not to help. To share the spectacle. To distribute the shame. To make his father's fall a story that others would know. Shem and Japheth did not respond with curiosity. They took a garment, laid it across their shoulders, and walked backward into the tent. They covered their father without looking. They absorbed the shame without spreading it. This was the difference. Ham saw and told. They heard and covered. The ancient world understood this distinction. To see nakedness and tell was to violate. To hear of nakedness and cover was to redeem. Ham violated. His brothers redeemed. And when Noah woke, when the wine had passed and the shame remained, he knew what had been done. Noah gathered his sons. The moment was heavy with destiny. To Japheth, the blessing of enlargement. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem. Expansion, but within the shelter of the covenant line. To Shem, the blessing of relationship. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. The divine presence, the walking together, the God who makes himself known. And to Ham, or rather to Ham's son, the word was different. Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. The curse fell not on Ham directly but on his fourth son, Canaan. The youngest son's youngest son, as if the consequence would echo down the generations. The wording has puzzled scholars for millennia. Why Canaan and not all of Ham's children? Why a curse instead of a blessing? The answer lies in what Ham saw and what he failed to do. He saw nakedness and did not cover it. He witnessed shame and made it public. The curse on Canaan was the curse of perpetual exposure, of being seen but not covered, of serving those who had learned to walk backward with garments of redemption. Canaan would become the land of the Hittites and Amorites, of Jebusites and Hivites, of peoples who would be displaced by the very line Ham had failed to honor. The irony was complete. Ham's descendants would build empires. They would raise pyramids and establish dynasties. But they would serve, in the end, the descendants of those who had covered rather than told. Ham had 4 sons, and from them came nations that would dominate the ancient world. Cush went south and east, to the land that would bear his name, the region of Ethiopia and Nubia, of gold and incense and warriors who fought with distinctive skill. From Cush came Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, the first to establish kingdom and empire, the builder of Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Mizraim went to the Nile, to the land that would be called Egypt, the Mizraim of the Hebrews, the greatest civilization of the ancient world, the builders of pyramids and temples that would stand for 4,000 years. From Mizraim came the Egyptians, the Philistines. The Caphtorim, peoples who would interact with the covenant line as both oppressors and hosts. Phut went west, to the coast of Africa, to Libya and the lands beyond, the source of mercenaries and traders and the exotic goods that flowed into Mediterranean ports. And Canaan, the cursed son, settled in the land between, the bridge of continents, the corridor of commerce and conquest, the territory that would become the prize of empires and the homeland of the people who would displace his own descendants. These were Ham's children. They were not cursed in their entirety. They were gifted with civilization, with architecture, with the arts of survival and dominance. But they carried the weight of their father's glance. The inheritance of seeing without covering, of knowing without redeeming. Nimrod was the grandson of Ham through Cush. The Bible calls him a mighty hunter before the Lord, but the phrase carries ambiguity. Before can mean in the presence of, or it can mean in opposition to. Nimrod hunted both animals and men. He established the first kingdom in human history, the first concentration of power, the first empire. He built cities. Babel, where the tower would rise. Erech, the seat of learning. Akkad, the center of administration. Calneh, the fortress. And from that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, Calah, and Rezin. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel. The end of his ambition was the tower. Nimrod saw what his grandfather Ham had seen, the nakedness of power. The possibility of human achievement without divine limitation. He gathered the people and said, "Let us build ourselves a city, and a tower whose top is in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." This was the spirit of Ham made political. The refusal to be scattered, the determination to make a name, the building of human glory without reference to the Creator. The result was confusion. The languages were divided. The tower was abandoned. The people were scattered precisely as they had feared. Nimrod's empire fragmented into the nations that would compete and war for the rest of human history. But his legacy remained. The city building. The name-making. The concentration of power. These would be the marks of Ham's descendants, the builders of civilization, the makers of empires, the ones who saw what could be done and did it without asking what should be done. Mizraim's descendants created the most enduring civilization of the ancient world. Egypt, the land of Ham, would exist for 3,000 years with a continuity that no other nation matched. They developed writing, mathematics, medicine, astronomy. They built structures that modern engineers still cannot fully explain. They preserved their dead with techniques that defy time. This was the genius of Ham's line, the practical, the achievable, the mastery of material reality. But Egypt also represents the limit of that genius. They built pyramids to reach heaven but did not find the God of heaven. They preserved bodies for eternity but did not understand resurrection. They created stability for millennia but could not create transformation. When Abraham went to Egypt in time of famine, he found a civilization that had already existed for 1,000 years. When Joseph was sold into slavery, he entered a world of established power and protocol. When Moses demanded that Pharaoh let his people go, he confronted the accumulated might of Ham's most successful descendants. The plagues were a demonstration. The God of Shem, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, against the gods of Egypt, the gods of Ham. The victory was decisive. The Exodus was the turning point. The descendants of the one who saw and told were defeated by the descendants of the ones who heard and covered. But Egypt remained. Even in decline, even under foreign rule. The land of Ham persisted, a reminder of what human achievement could build and what it could not save. Canaan was the youngest son of Ham, the one on whom the curse fell. His descendants settled the land between the Jordan and the sea, the corridor between Egypt and Mesopotamia, the bridge of trade and war. They were not a unified people but a collection of tribes: Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. Each with their own cities, their own gods, their own customs. But united by their descent from the one who had seen and told. The curse on Canaan was the curse of displacement. They would serve the descendants of Shem. Their land would become the possession of others. Their cities would be destroyed. Their gods would be overthrown. This was not immediate. For centuries, the Canaanites built and traded and worshipped. They established Jerusalem, the city that would bear their name before it bore Israel's. They developed the alphabet that would be adopted by the Greeks and Romans and eventually by the world. They created art and commerce and the sophisticated culture of Levantine civilization. But the curse was working. Abraham passed through their land and received the promise that it would one day belong to his descendants. Isaac and Jacob sojourned among them. And when the children of Israel came out of Egypt, when the Exodus generation crossed the Jordan, the fulfillment began. The Canaanites were displaced, destroyed, or subjected. Their land became Israel. Their cities became Hebrew. Their gods were forgotten. The curse of Canaan was complete. The servant of servants had served, and the service had been the loss of everything. But Ham was more than a cautionary tale. He was a father. He was a survivor. He was a human being who made a terrible choice in a moment of weakness and lived with the consequences for 500 years. The Bible records that Ham saw the nakedness of his father. It does not record that he intended harm. Curiosity is not malice. The telling was the failure, not the seeing. And even in the telling, there is a possibility of interpretation. Did Ham mock? Did he laugh? Did he express contempt? The text is silent. Did he simply report, with a neutrality that was itself the violation? We do not know. What we know is the consequence. The curse on Canaan. The servitude of descendants. The permanent alteration of family destiny. This is the weight of biblical narrative. Actions have consequences that outlast intentions. Moments have meanings that transcend understanding. Ham's glance lasted seconds. Its effects lasted millennia. This is not cruelty on the part of the divine. This is the reality of human existence. We are connected across generations. Our weaknesses become our children's burdens. Our failures shape their futures. Ham's story is the story of every parent who has ever wounded their child by their own unhealed pain, every family that has transmitted brokenness down the line, every human being who has ever wished to take back a moment of blindness and choose sight instead. Yet there is redemption in Ham's line, even if it is not the redemption of the covenant. The Egyptians, for all their paganism, sheltered Abraham and Sarah. They hosted Israel during the famine and gave them Goshen to dwell in. They produced Moses, the greatest prophet of the Old Testament, who was trained in their courts and learned their wisdom. The Cushites, for all their distance, would one day come to Jerusalem seeking the God of Israel, and the prophet Isaiah would speak of them with respect. The Phutites would trade and interact with the Mediterranean world, bringing goods and ideas and the reminder that humanity was broader than the covenant line. And the Canaanites, for all their curse, gave the alphabet to the world. They built Jerusalem. They established the very land that would become holy. Their displacement was tragic, but their contribution was real. Ham's descendants were not evil. They were human. They built without the presence that Shem preserved. They expanded without the relationship that the God of Shem offered. They achieved without the transformation that the covenant promised. But they achieved. They built. They left marks on history that we still study and admire. The pyramids remain. The hieroglyphs are still read. The cities of Canaan are still excavated. This is the complexity of the biblical world. It is not divided into good and evil, saved and damned, blessed and cursed. It is divided into those who walk with God and those who do not, and both categories contain greatness and tragedy, achievement and loss, wisdom and blindness. But here is what they never tell you. Here is the revelation that changes everything. Ham's curse was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a different story. The descendants of Cush would one day convert to Christianity and establish kingdoms that lasted until modern times. The Egyptians, for all their pagan past, would become a Christian nation, then a Muslim nation, preserving their identity while changing their worship. The Canaanites, displaced and destroyed, would not disappear entirely. Their blood flowed in the veins of the Israelites who intermarried with them. Their cities became the foundations of Hebrew culture. Rahab the harlot, who saved the spies at Jericho, was a Canaanite. She entered the line of Messiah. Ruth the Moabitess, descended from Lot who was saved from Sodom, entered the line of Messiah. The curse of Canaan was overcome by the grace that exceeds curses. Ham's line, for all its exclusion from the covenant, was not excluded from redemption. The God of Shem is also the God of Ham, even if Ham's descendants did not know his name. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. The sun rises on the evil and the good. The promise to Abraham that all nations would be blessed through him included the nations of Ham. The question for you is not whether you are descended from the one who covered or the one who told. The question is whether you will cover. Whether you will redeem the shame you see rather than spread it. Whether you will walk backward with a garment rather than forward with a story. The waters have risen again. Not the flood of Noah but the flood of exposure, of social media, of the endless telling of what should be covered. The spirit of Ham is everywhere, seeing and sharing, exposing and destroying. And somewhere, in the quiet of an ordinary afternoon, a voice is speaking to someone who will listen. Cover. Protect. Redeem. Will that someone be you? The God of Shem is waiting. But he is also the God of Ham. And the promise is for all who will receive it. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of generational consequence pressing against your chest, then you need to act before the cycle repeats. Subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications, because we are building a community of covering, of redemption, of modern-day descendants of Shem who choose to walk backward with garments rather than forward with gossip. Comment the word cover below if you are committed to redeeming what you see rather than exposing it. Share this video with one person who needs to know that curses can be overcome and that no family failure is final. The time to cover is before the exposure, not after. The time to redeem is while the shame is still fresh. Act now, Ham saw too much. But he also saw truly. He saw the nakedness that others pretended did not exist. He saw the reality behind the reverence. His failure was not in seeing. It was in what he did with the seeing. He told when he should have covered. He spread when he should have absorbed. He made public when he should have protected. But his descendants built the ancient world. They created what others only dreamed. They achieved what the covenant line only inherited. And in the end, the God of Shem became their God too. The curse was overcome. The promise was extended. The redemption was real. The waters are rising again. The exposure is everywhere. The telling never stops. And somewhere, in the quiet of an ordinary afternoon, a voice is speaking to someone who will listen. Cover. Protect. Redeem. Will that someone be you? The God of Shem is still the God of those who cover. But he is also the God of Ham. And the door is open for all who will walk through it.